maybe a little bit of an Aussie perspective, even though we know Steve's now fully a Londoner and basically a Brit at this stage. But Steve, welcome on board. And how do you see the World Club Challenge going?
Well, I might be full English now, but my wife says I'm not allowed to eat full English breakfast, so I suppose that makes me still neutral. I think there is a bit more interest in Australia. I know you were going to ask me about that. I think the culture of the game in Australia is changing a little bit. I think some of the kind of more recidivist bullies are becoming a little less powerful in the game in Australia. I see Peter Beattie, who's might have his flaws as a politician, but he seems more of an outward-looking sort of fellow. So I think the World Club Challenge is probably being viewed a little bit more charitably in Australia than it has most of the time since I first went to one in 1994. Having said that, I think I didn't watch as much NRL last year as I probably did at any time since the NRL existed, but I did like to look at the Roosters on grand final day. Wigan obviously lost some players and a coach. We're in a bit of a transitional period. I think Trent Robinson's been taking the game seriously. So just based on all those things I just mentioned, I think that someone asked me earlier for a tip. I said Roosters by 10, but what I regard as an upset, it wouldn't surprise me.
So you think, obviously you're in line with what the bookies think, you're in line with what Alan thinks, you're in line with what 60% of our voters in the poll we did thinks. So you're on board with that. Now, should the game's kicking off at 6 o'clock in Australia in the morning on Monday. Do you think many people will get up to tune into that, given that they haven't really had much rugby league to watch? Obviously, they'll have the Indigenous All-Stars game this weekend too.
I was talking to Gabe Hamlin, actually, and I've got to say, I knew so little about him that when he answered my first question with an Aussie accent, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I knew absolutely nothing about him. But I said, what are your World Club Challenge memories? And for me, it's like, Wigan winning in Brisbane. And, I remember a lot of 1997 World Club Championship games quite vividly. His was way back when South Sydney won in 2015. And he's from South Sydney, and he said he remembers it because he got up and watched Souths, and he said you've got to be a really big fan of a team to get up that time of the morning. You still, I guess, you're still trying to hang on to summer a little bit. Rugby league's just around the corner, and that's a good thing, but a lot of bad things come with, if we live in Australia, a lot of bad things come with winter. The temperature drops like below 15 Celsius, So in answer to your question, I think the hardcore rugby league fans will get up and watch it, and the hardcore Roosters fans will get up and watch it, but it probably won't sort of pierce the public consciousness that much. I think one reporter's coming over, that's from NRL.com, who are obscenely resourced. I don't think you'll find anyone from, not a Sydney reporter will be here, just be TV guys coming up from London. That's the answer to the question. I think the ratings, will be better than whatever else is normally on Monday morning at 6, maybe Thomas a Tank Engine or whatever, but still not huge.
Alan, I know you wanted to mention how they've built up to the event this year, and maybe I've noticed that the trophy that they have now is far superior to the one that we had for many years. So what did you want to mention about the way the game's been brought in, Al?
Yeah, it helps that the trophy is actually 3D this year. That's a positive move forward. But no, obviously beyond the actual trophy for the World Club Challenge, obviously the NRL trophy is here. It's going on tour around Super League grounds. Obviously, the Roosters have done a really good job in terms of kind of integration with clubs in the Northern Hemisphere, with Toulouse and with St Helens. So I just want to say I think they're actually marketing it pretty well over here, really, in terms of, and obviously that's you were saying that in terms of ticket sales, they seem to be going pretty well. So hopefully it'll be a near full house, if not a full house. So and you'll really get that kind of. it'll seem like an event, a real kind of something to tune in for, which is obviously what rugby league needs more of.
Yeah, well, we know Wigan have already sold more than 20,000 tickets for the match. Let's talk a little bit more about the game that's going to be played out on the field. Steve, we think that Lachlan Lamb isn't going to be involved now, which is possibly a little bit of a disappointment given the build-up that had. And Dan Sargent's rated at 80% to play. Do you think there's any key matchups on the pitch that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, I love an injury story, and I hope it carries on till an hour before kickoff. So let's not kill him off, but give us something to write about. I just think in the halves, I just think if Luke Keary plays and Cooper Cronk plays and George Williams just has to be everything to everybody on Sunday night if Wigan are going to win. Just based on what I saw last week, played great last week, man of the match. Needs to play twice as well this week.
He was man of the match, wasn't he, against Cronulla as well? So he has done it in these games as George Williams.
He was man of the match, wasn't he? Yeah, he was. I think that obviously the battle in the half is going to be good, but really interested to see Trent Robertson's been quite positive and sort of evangelical about this game. That's coach of the Roosters. If you don't follow that closely, I'd be very interested to see what he instructs his team to do. Whether they play a really structured game. I think with Cooper Cronk in the team, you can't not be structured. I mean, if you were to play off the top of your head, I think Cooper Cronk's head would explode. He's not like that. He's a man of strategy and structure and order.
Well, when you're that good at reading like 3 or 4 plays ahead of your opposition, I suppose you want to play to a structure because your structure works so much faster than anyone else can keep up.
Well, I used to write stories about previews of Melbourne played. They gave Melbourne 3:00 Saturday afternoon for a whole season 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And when you work in newspapers, you've got you're covering a night game. It's different now, but back then you had to fill the hole with a story. That would be chucked out after the first 2 editions. So every single week I previewed Melbourne games. I remember asking Cooper Cronk, where does your name come from? Everyone asks that. I've got no idea. And it was always about Matthew Johns was down there teaching him to be a half because he was a converted halfback. He had no idea about the position, and he was just basically thrown into the deep end. I think he was an outside back or a back rower. He's thrown into the deep end because they didn't have one. They didn't have a halfback. So sometimes I think maybe, you talk about natural talent, nature versus nurture. No one's been created as much, this side of Milli Vanilli as Cooper Cronk, and that's probably why he's such a structured player, because in the end he was what was lacking in his instinct. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just they had to fill those holes.
So it's almost like the structure of Cronk versus the instinct of George Williams, and George Williams isn't the greatest decision maker sometimes, but if he can make the right decision 50-60% of the time, then it's going to cause some problems. Is George Williams maybe the player that the NRL clubs might be watching most closely in this game as well, Steve?
Yeah, I think he went to Denver last year and didn't get a start.
He was injured.
But even that's right. He got you're right. You're right. There you go.
I don't know why we let him go on the plane, to be honest. They
let him go. They let him go, even though he was injured, just for the experience. You're right. But all the clubs were interested, then. I think there is a bit of there will be quite a bit of interest in him, but the tide seems to be turning a little bit. The next step after bringing players bringing players in from the NRL is, I guess, to stop players going there in the first place. So, he might be a bit of a test for Robert Elston and the New Beginnings.
Yeah, no, excellent. So. That's the half is going to be the key battle. Wigan have got some fitness in. All the fan points that we had came in. Anyone who was kind of hoping good stuff for Wigan, Alan, were saying, well, Wigan's season started, the Roosters season hasn't started. How do you think that much that'll be much of a factor? I'll start with you, Alan, on that one.
I think it possibly will be a factor early on, but I think Robinson's more likely to fall back on structure and be a bit more conservative early on. Kind of get his team into the game, kind of remind them what this is all about. So I would see it being quite tight early on. I think you'll be both teams will be quite conservative. But ultimately, I think I don't think necessarily you'll see much difference in terms of fitness between the teams. Obviously, we're going to have had 2 serious hit-outs. Roosters have just had 2 opposed training sessions. You'd probably say that the slight advantage for Wigan, but for me that just keeps it a bit closer than if they were on a level playing field.
Well, I'll take any advantage we can get. So 2 games and 20,000 Wigan voices. They're the advantages I'll take as a Wigan fan. Steve, sort of same question to you, I guess. Do you think that is a big advantage for Wigan going into the game?
You know, like I said, I covered every one from 1994 to 2017, and it's a good preview angle about the fitness aspect. But I've found over the years that it comes down to preparation. So if the Aussie team has a good preparation and treats it like there's a trophy up for grabs, then it tends to not be a factor that they just started their season. If on the other hand, they like Cronulla, they go to Paris, you know, in the lead up. And have a few drinks and treat it like a pre-season bonding session, then it is. So judging by what I've seen, you know what's great is that we know that every NRL team and every Super League team does a shed load of wrestling, but they never film it. It's a secret. It's rugby league's dirty little secret, wrestling. And we actually saw Toulouse. We saw Toulouse film the wrestling session with the Roosters the other day, which I thought was wonderful, you know. But it showed to me that you know they're pretty serious, and Trent's an internationalist, and this year I don't think it's going to be a factor. I think some years it is.
Fair enough. One last question then, I think, Steve, for you. Because you kind of would go in that way with talking about Trent being an internationalist. What do you think the future of this match is? Do you think it's going to be this year-to-year thing of can someone force it over the line somehow, or do you think we're going to start getting some solid foundations for this being in the calendar every year without any question?
Mark, if you hadn't asked that question, whatever you did ask, I would have tagged the answer on the end of my answer anyway, because I've got a vibe about this just today, talking to a few people, and the vibe I've got is that the World Club Challenge is going to become basically, even though they're talking about playing it in neutral territory and all that sort of stuff, which we'd all love to have a World Nine circuit and all that, but I sense that it is going to become basically a new property on the British domestic calendar, and that it will be sold to cities, and that we're going to go back to the future next year, where it will be on the week after the Super League Grand Final. It'll be like 1992 for the oldies listening. We had Brisbane played Wigan one week, World Cup final the following week at Wembley. I know that's hard to comprehend if you're
that was when the World Cup was played over 4 years, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly. The World Cup, that's why we played the World Cup over 4 years. We couldn't be bothered to have a tournament. And so that's the one where Renouf palmed off Devereaux. And the week before that, the Brisbane players came over, played Wigan in the north, and then that game was played in the south. So I
played Anfield, wasn't it, that one? If I'm right. If I remember right.
No, I think maybe it was. Maybe you're right. Maybe it was. It was the last one I missed.
There was one. They did used to be played sometimes at neutral venues, didn't they?
Yeah, well, we have had a number at Anfield, but I watch highlights on TV, and I never watched another one on TV until last year because I went to every single one between then and last year. But so I'm tipping next year that the World Club Challenge will be sold as a property along with Magic and Summer Bash and the Challenge Cup, the semi-final doubleheader. Regardless of who's in it, Super League will flog it off to a British city and it will be on the week before the Kangaroo Tour starts. That's what I feel. And then the following year is obviously a World Cup year. I wouldn't be surprised if it basically, it's like sort of geological epoch.